One of the great honors I have at BYU is teaching a class for all the non-members that come. It's typically international students and a whole lot of athletes that have been recruited to BYU to come. And when they first arrive, it's kind of like, what have I gotten myself into? This place is swarming with Latter-day Saints, and I don't know how to navigate this experience for myself. Well, it's an introduction to the church class that I teach, and I absolutely love it. I let them know from the start, this is not a covert missionary operation. I'm just trying to help you navigate your time here. And if I were a student at Notre Dame, yes, I would want a class on Catholicism. If I was a student at Baylor, yes, I want to know a little bit what it's like to be a Southern Baptist. To understand this, though, I often will ask them, what do you already know about the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints? And invariably, the word of wisdom is one of the first things they mention. Now, they don't know to call it the word of wisdom. If I were to ask them if they knew what the word of wisdom is, they'd probably be thinking something more intellectual about gaining wisdom, learning things. But in this one, no, we're learning how to live. We're learning how to eat. We're learning how to take care of this gift of a physical body. But when I ask them what they already know, they're like, oh yeah, Mormons, as they like to call us, you guys don't drink, you don't smoke, and you don't take coffee. You don't drink coffee or tea either. Oh, well done. Now, is that all you know about it, or are you ready to dig a little deeper? And I hope that we know a little bit more about the word of wisdom than that. As we turn to section 89, it's both a book, a revelation of do's and don'ts. And as these non-members made it clear, it's usually the don'ts that are more famous. So we'll start with that, okay? If you want to begin, let's dive into verse 5 and 6 first. Section 89, verse 5 and 6, that inasmuch as any man drinketh wine or strong drink among you, okay, there's some don'ts. Behold, it is not good, neither meat in the sight of your Father. Only, so is there an exception here? Only in assembling yourselves together to offer up your sacraments before him. And behold, this should be wine, yea, pure wine of the grape of the vine, of your own make. So there is a purpose for wine, but it's not the type of purpose that people typically invoke. This is sacramental as far as the Lord is concerned. And in some ways, if we see the body as a gift from God, if we see body and spirit together forming the soul of human beings, then perhaps everything we eat should be sacramental in a sort. To see the true purpose for what the Lord has given that unfortunately sometimes gets adulterated by we mere mortals, that's not what the Lord intended for this. Because some people will say, well, if God made it, it can't be bad. Well, what did he make it for? That's a follow-up question we need to be asking. Now, there's something else about this verse that I just read. I want you to keep in mind. We'll come back to it in just a moment. How does it describe this wine? It needs to be pure, and it needs to be of your own make. We got hints of that way back in section 27 when Joseph Smith was stopped on his way to procure wine for the sacrament. No, don't buy it from your enemies. Make it yourself. And here's a repetition of that. Beyond that, if you look at verse 7 through 9, here's a few more don'ts, famous ones. Again, strong drinks are not for the belly, but for the washing of your bodies. Oh, interesting. So I'm drinking what I'm supposed to be washing with. It's meant to be external, and I've somehow turned it into something internal. No wonder it's wreaking havoc in there. Okay, we got some problems. Again, tobacco is not for the body, neither for the belly, and is not good for man, but is an herb for bruises and all sick cattle, to be used with judgment and skill. Interesting. Talk about using it. Now where it's intended for a different species. And to see some kind of tobacco poultice that's going to help the bruised cattle out in the herd. And I'm smoking it instead. I'm sticking it in my mouth and spitting tobacco juice. This is not what it was designed for. One other verse there in verse 9. Again, hot drinks are not for the body or belly. And according to understanding in the 1830s, hot drinks was clear for everyone. Oh, that's coffee and tea. Okay. Now, there's all kinds of places we could go beyond this. Some would say, oh, that's all it is, so just leave it at that. And as long as it's not specifically forbidden in the word of wisdom, then it's fair game. Well, human beings are pretty creative. And so we've created all kinds of additional things that if they'd existed in 1833, then yeah, you better believe they would have been forbidden then too. I think it was President Hinckley who once joked that, jumping off a bridge onto the freeway isn't against the word of wisdom technically either, but who would do that? Well, there's all kinds of things we do to our bodies that were not intended to be done. So I'm hoping that we can broaden our understanding of the word of wisdom beyond some kind of list of prohibited substances. Talk about letter of the law. If we can approach it from the spirit of the law, what are the principles behind the word of wisdom that would govern my own decisions of what I want to take into my body and what I'm deciding not to? Okay, let's think about it in those terms. For that, go start at the very beginning. And I love that the Lord couches those prohibitions that we just read in something that's supposed to get us ready to receive it in the proper spirit. Okay, I'm reversing order for a reason. Okay, I wanted to go straight to what people typically assume. Oh yeah, it's just a list of don'ts. Oh no. Remember those, but let's see how the Lord frames it. Starting in verse 1. A word of wisdom. That's where we get the title. For the benefit of the council of high priests assembled in Kirtland and the church and also the saints in Zion. So wherever you happen to be living, this is a word of wisdom to you. It's meant for your benefit. We're not trying to restrict you. We're not trying to suck the fun out of life. I'm trying to bless you. I'm trying to benefit you. So here's a word of wisdom. Now, next verse, to be sent greeting, not by commandment or constraint, but by revelation and the word of wisdom, showing forth the order and will of God in the temporal salvation of all saints in the last days. We often picture the Lord being so concerned about our spiritual salvation, and he is. But remember section 29, nothing is purely spiritual for the Lord. Nothing is purely temporal for the Lord. Everything's spiritual for him. So even our temporal salvation is a spiritual thing. Even our body is part of the soul, as much as our spirit is. So the Lord is as concerned about physical things as he is spiritual things. And we need to embrace it that way. But notice the way he presents it. Greetings. Hey, good to see you, saints. Nice to see you there in Kirtland. Nice to see you down in Missouri. I'm giving you some wise counsel. I'm not couching this as a commandment. I'm not trying to constrain you. Remember, we've seen the center of gravity shift throughout the Doctrine Covenants from commandments to more counsel, in hoping that we can accept true principles and then govern ourselves. If you're anything like some people I know, as soon as you're told what you have to do, all of a sudden now the hackles go up and I don't want to have to do it. Well, originally it was not meant as a commandment or some kind of constraint. It grew into that as time went on. And in some ways, it might be a matter of the Lord letting us grow into obedience to it. When it comes to harmful substances, many are addictive in nature. And while some people have had the power to just quit cold turkey and never look back, for most people, it takes time. And so in some ways, this is the Lord's patient approach to helping us become what he expects of us. And again, framing it in a way that honors our agency. Now, keep going on these principles, though, and look at verse 3. This is what he calls it. Given for a principle with promise. So let's get past the letter of the law, and these are the specific things listed. Let's look for the principle, and let's look for the promises that are associated. Notice it's adapted to the capacity of the weak and the weakest of all saints who are or can be called saints. Now, I remember wrestling with this 4 years ago when we studied this section together. And I worried that people who had word of wisdom challenges, my wife works in addiction recovery, my son works in addiction recovery, and the word of wisdom often they will use as a club to beat themselves. Like, why can't I do this? And that's the verse that hurts them most, because it says, even the weakest saint should be able to live this way. And if I'm falling short of what was meant to be the lowest common denominator, am I even worthy to be considered a saint at all? I mean, obviously, I'm not living like one right now, but how could I if I can't even clear the lowest imaginable bar? I hope that none of us feel that way. about this principle with promise that the Lord has given for our benefit. And perhaps this is actually something that one of you shared with me 4 years ago that I was so grateful for. They said, well, speaking of addiction, often we don't even know that we are addicts in the making until we try something. And while some people miraculously can try drugs or try alcohol, and it doesn't shackle them into an addictive lifestyle. For many others, they were always an addict, they just didn't know it. And as soon as they found their drug of choice, well, that drug chose them and wouldn't let them go. And so what if, this friend described to me, what if the Lord was giving us a word of wisdom, some counsel, with some principles with promise, with the assumption that I am trying to help everyone guard themselves against these kinds of things. And if you are the type that even one taste would lead to addiction, something that is so strong and powerful, it has such an unbreakable grip on you that you do not have the strength to overcome that on your own, then allow me to steer you clear of that before the problem even arises. Don't even try it. For those who have never tried any of those things, stay that way. And assume I might be the weakest among the saints, and I don't want to fall into a trap that I cannot get out of. And so total abstinence from these kinds of substances from the very beginning. I was very grateful for that insight. There's more in verse 4, though. He says, behold, verily, thus saith the Lord unto you. And this is where I see, if we can wrap our heads and hearts around verse 4, boy, will we be more careful about what we take into our body. He says, in consequence of evils and designs which do and will, so we got present and future here, that which do and will exist in the hearts of conspiring men in the last days, I have warned you and forewarn you by giving unto you this word of wisdom by revelation. So I'm warning you in the present about things that do exist in the present. But I'm also forewarning you, looking toward the future, for things that will exist in the future. That's fascinating. No wonder we need to approach this as a principle with promise instead of a list, because if it's letter of the law list, then we're stuck in their present, which is our past. And we are completely unprepared for their future that is now our present. Does this make sense? What else exists out there that can cause the same kinds of problems as the list that we see in section 89? And if you think about conspiring men in the last days, people that are doing their very best to trap us, this is not just drugs and alcohol. Could there be other things that are addictive in nature? And not just addiction, are there other things that harm the body and thereby harm the soul? Are there things that conspiring companies do in terms of their advertising, in terms of what they put into even normal food that's not very normal anymore, and the kind of ultra-processed food, the way it's packaged, the way it's sold, the way they I'll put it this way. If we are driven by a consumer culture, and consume now in a literal sense, but I am consuming things, and my consumerism coupled with their commercialism, remember the law of consecration was meant to protect us from those kinds of things economically? Well, the word of wisdom is meant to protect us from those kinds of things in terms of what we eat. I remember reading an article years ago about McDonald's McGriddles, and I'll confess, McGriddles are pretty amazing. But they're amazing not just in terms of their flavor, they're amazing in terms of their chemistry. The article was about the chemical challenge of creating buns that were supposed to be like pancakes that tasted like syrup. But if they're syrupy pancakes, you don't want to hold them with your hands because you'll end up getting it's too sticky. So how's this for a challenge in the lab? Create syrupy pancakes that don't get sticky. And that became a chemical question. The interesting thing about so much of what we eat, it's one thing to go to grocery stores instead of gardens, but that's kind of necessary in our day. But what about going to labs instead of kitchens? What about going to chemists instead of cooks? And read the ingredients on the back of almost anything you eat, and it's shocking how little of the things you read are things you can actually picture growing somewhere. Okay? Do you remember what I said earlier? Keep your eye on the word pure and the phrase of your own make when it came to that sacramental wine. Well, I wonder about the things that we put into our body. How much of it is pure? And how much of it is of our own make? I know we live in a busy time, and having a garden out in the backyard that covers all of your family's needs is largely impossible for most people. But to consider, have I fallen prey to the conspiring minds of a commercialist culture that is having me eat things that aren't exactly nourishing, at least not as much as they could be? I'm going to leave most of those questions to you and the Holy Ghost, since this is a principle with promise, rather than some kind of list that we need to be following, letter of the law. But I do hope we can get past the list to live the principle. In every non-member class I've taught, when we talk about the word of wisdom, every single time someone will raise their hand, a non-Latter-day Saint, and say, okay, this makes sense, actually. Again, many of them are athletes who are very careful about what they take into their body. But they'll say, so you Latter-day Saints don't drink and you don't smoke and no coffee and tea. I get that. But then why do you guys pound energy drinks like they're going out of style? And I just smile and I say, the fact you can see that and people in my own community can't seem to tells me something. Now, again, I'm not adding to the list. That's not my place. But I do hope that we don't have to be compelled or commanded. I hope that we can be open to ponder principles and promises and be careful about the things we take into our body, because by doing that, we are taking things into our soul. Last thing I'll say about this, one more principle to ponder. As many of you know, the history behind this revelation is Emma Smith cleaning up the mess at the School of the Prophets upstairs in Kirtland and seeing the tobacco stains and the smoke that had to clear the room. And she, recognizing what she considered a problem, had the courage to raise her voice. She spoke up and spoke out to her husband, to the prophet in that case, and asked Joseph, could you ask the Lord about this? I'm not sure if this is exactly the way things are supposed to be. Will you ask? I think there's a beautiful precedent and principle set there about our having eyes to see and a voice to speak and also a heart to receive the answers that the Lord gives. If we can follow that, not just in word of wisdom issues, but in so many aspects of life, this principle with promise will bring some promised blessings from the Lord.